Jason, thanks for joining us. Just a little bit of information about Jason for everyone. Jason Pugh is NOMA's new director for the next 2 years, actually. His NOMA being the National Organization of Minority Architects. His long collaboration has been a large part of his career. He'll be the first NOMA leader who is both a licensed architect and a certified planner. Jason is a passionate architect whose work at Gensler is widely recognized. He has contributed tremendously to the advancement of underserved communities and the creation of affordable housing. Jason is an advocate for participatory design, integrating communities' voices of architectural and urbanistic processes. Born in Denver, Jason graduated at Howard University, one of 7 historically Black colleges and universities, with an architecture accreditation. Pugh earned his Master of Science in Architecture and Urban Design from Columbia University. Thanks, Jason, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So Jason, you're both a licensed architect and an urban planner. Which area do you enjoy more, and what are the challenges and differences between the two?
That's a tough question, and I saw that one in the questions that you said. Honestly, it's, if I had to pick one, it's definitely going to probably fall with urban design. What really drew me to urban design is just the community engagement piece, the opportunity to get on the ground, to connect with community residents, to connect with stakeholders, and try to find a way to amplify their voice and ownership as part of the design process. So those are the projects that I really, really do enjoy. I'll be honest with you, if I don't have to see another wall section detail for the rest of my life, I'm cool with that. But if I need to get into a detail, I can. So it's awesome to jump between the macro and micro scales. But in terms of the engagement piece and connecting with communities, those are the projects that I've really enjoyed. So at Gensler, I've been able to work on a lot of former public housing sites throughout the south and west side of Chicago. And in some cases, I'm actually able to take the art design and our scope of services beyond just the initial conceptual master plan and actually do some of the first phase architecture. And so those are the projects that I really get to enjoy, to kind of jump between those scales. But yeah, if I had to pick one, probably urban design.
All right, that's good to know. So
don't tell the NOMA members about that.
Keep my mouth shut. So how did you? You said you have a preference for urban design, urban planning. How did you get into and approach architecture then? What first drew you there?
Yeah, so it was really at Howard University. So like most of you, I'm sure in school you have different elective courses that you take. And so for me, there were 2 professors, Harry G. Robinson. You may be familiar with Harry Robinson. He's a fellow and a former dean and chair of the architecture program. He taught a urban design elective course, I believe my 3rd year. And then beyond that, Edward Dunson, who is still a professor there with the department. And Professor Dunson did a lot of overlay or included certain urban design programming within our studio projects. And so collectively, the 2 of them, I think I could probably point to as being really pivotal and influential in my decision to go on to grad school and pursue a master's degree in urban design. Both of them are also duly licensed. They're licensed in both architecture and planning. Harry Robinson, he went to GSD for his master's degree in planning, and Dunson went to Columbia and actually encouraged me to apply to his alma mater. And I remember as a student just kind of sitting back like, wow, to be licensed in both disciplines, that's awesome. That's a goal. That's something I'm going to set for myself. So, and I was able to finally check that box just a little under 2 years ago when I finally completed the AACP. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to always, I guess they say never stop learning, right? So your connection with NOMA comes from all your college years. How does it feel to now preside over NOMA and to do it in such challenging and holistic times?
It's really humbling, honestly. Even just kind of, joking before the call with Paola, when we last saw each other at the NOMA Philadelphia conference back in 2014, I never sought out to be the president of NOMA. That was never a goal of mine. I always just wanted to be involved. I did serve as the student chapter president when I was at Howard, and we helped resurrect the student chapter on campus. And then when I was in grad school, I kind of stepped away just because the program and curriculum was just so demanding at Columbia. Wasn't able to really be engaged with the local New York chapter. But when I moved to Chicago in 2007, that's when I got re-engaged. And NOMA was actually the first organization that I reached out to and looked up when I moved to Chicago, and I was able to get connected. And then over the years, started to take on just more and more leadership. I ended up stepping up and serving as the local chapter president for the Illinois chapter back in 2015, 2016, and then also started to serve on the national board in a variety of different capacities. I mean, I've literally have almost served, not in every position, but almost every tier. I was a university liaison, which is like a conduit between the board and the student chapters in my region. From there, I stepped up and served as a regional VP, managing the chapters, the professional chapters in the region. And then I was, very excited when I was elected president-elect to follow Kimberly Dowdell to serve as president. So yeah, everyone's asked me, how do you feel about stepping up as, to lead as president, especially after being in the organization for so long? And I tell everyone, NOMA is one of those organizations where, if you volunteer, you say yes, you kind of just put your head down and try to help and do whatever you can. Over time, you look up and there's just a lot of opportunities in front of you, and a lot of people who encourage you to step up and lead. And that's literally what happened with me ascending to the position that I'm in now. But with regards to the time and age that we're in today, I mean, this is a pivotal moment. This is a watershed moment. I truly do believe. The industry was already really picking up in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion before last summer. There were already trends. And what was interesting about it was, and if you've heard me discuss or make a comparison with sustainability back in 2005 or early 2000s, at that point during the industry, it was us educating our clients, right? Us educating the clients and the communities about the importance of sustainability, green design, LEED, USGBC, everything started just kind of piling on, and all these firms are running around pounding their chest saying, oh, we have X amount of LEED APs and LEED gold, platinum, silver projects and net zero buildings, and that was the thing, right? But we were leading that charge. We were leading that discussion. What's interesting about diverse equity inclusion is we were not on the front end of that. We were not leading that discussion. Our clients were. A lot of firms, were going into these interviews with clients, and they were asking us, what does the diversity makeshift of your board look like, or your project team, or what's your stance on corporate social responsibility? And let's be honest, a lot of firms were caught flat-footed. They didn't know necessarily how to respond to this, and they're coming out of those interviews like, damn, we got to get our stuff together. We need to figure out what we're going to do. So that was already kind of trending. And then with the senseless death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and just the civil unrest that followed this past summer, I mean, it just exploded. So, and now it's on everyone's radar. And so I think that this is really an honest moment for us to make a huge impact, really move the needle, forge some really strong partnerships with allied organizations and entities, to hopefully just take advantage and move the needle in an impactful way. The last piece, and it's a joke that I kind of share with a lot of folks internally, with NOMA, because NOMA's hot right now. Everybody's reaching out to NOMA, they're asking us to, support or be involved with this, serve on this panel. We like to partner with you on this, and I'll be honest, after a few conversations with some entities, you can tell between those who are being authentic and really want to, dig in and get on the ground and really try to help move the effort. And then others who are trying to check a box or have something that they can point to and say, yeah, we support diversity and inclusion. Look what we did. We partnered with NOMA on this, right? So you can tell, and we're trying to, kind of filter through some of those and really give more, I think, tuned attention and time to those who are trying to do an impactful way. But I joke about it just saying that, it's like a party. NOMA, we've been at the party. I mean, we've been in the party, standing on the wall, while everybody's dancing and partying and everybody's ignoring us. I mean, we were there before 10. It was free before 10. We got there early. Nobody wanted to give us any attention. But now, we're that hot guy, hot girl in the room that everybody wants to dance with, and it's last call. So, it's hey, so we're trying to get as many phone numbers as we can before the party ends.
Yep, build that list now. Talking about that, where else do you see NOMA going under your leadership now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kim, first I have to give kudos and a tip of the hat to my predecessor, Kimberly Dowdell. She just did a phenomenal job. I mean, I have really, really huge shoes to fill just following in her leadership footsteps. She did a really good job, not only leading us through a global pandemic, which, really absorbed, I think, the second half of her presidency, but also the civil unrest with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything else that's been sweeping through our industry around diversity, equity, and inclusion. She did a really phenomenal job. And while tackling all that, she also put in place a lot of infrastructure just in terms of our team, our support, the ways that we can better serve our membership base. I'm really trying to utilize some of the great work that she did as a springboard to kind of carry forward. And she had a platform, all in for NOMA, with all being this acronym for access, legacy, and leadership. And everyone, even when I was kind of leading in or stepping into this role, everyone was asking me, well, what is your presidential platform? And I had to reassure everyone that we're still all in, we're still all in for NOMA, but I'm going to expand that and have a focused effort on the education, elevation, and empowerment of our membership base. And so, and that comes in the form of those three pillars, several initiatives that fall under each of those individual targets. But in particular, I'll talk about creating tangible value and being a part of NOMA, right? For a lot of folks, their only engagement with NOMA is the annual conference. That they go to the conference in the fall, they get a chance to reconnect with friends and mentors and mentees and get inspired by a lot of the amazing things that other people are doing across the country. I mentioned in 2014 when Paola actually came and spoke and addressed our members and was sharing the amazing work that she was doing, with her new firm. I mean, and everyone always walks away from the conference just rejuvenated, inspired. For me, recharged. Working at a large corporate firm, that battery can drain very quickly, and so it's awesome to go to the conference. But then you go back to your respective city or town, and in some cases, not everyone has a local NOMA chapter. Worse yet, some NOMA chapters just aren't that active or engaged, and so really, for us, it's finding ways that we can take some of the successful playbooks that have been established by some of our more prominent successful chapters like SoCal and INOMA and NICOBA, and really share that playbook, those resources, those lessons learned, best practices with our other chapters, and help raise the performance bar of our local chapters, both student and professional chapters, which will help, I think, really infuse and reestablish, I think, the value in being a part of the organization. Kim did a really, really amazing job of bringing in new members. In fact, we doubled our membership base during her presidency, which was phenomenal. But when we mined the data a little bit deeper, we actually realized that we're not doing too great in retention. And so I want to find ways to really strengthen that. And I believe that happens at the local level.
All right, thanks. You mentioned a little bit about the challenges at the corporate level. At Gensler, you've worked to bring more participatory decision-making to the process. How do you implement this participatory decision-making in cities as complex as, and diverse as Chicago or other cities similar?
Yep. So there's actually an interesting model that I've had a chance to participate in a couple of times down here in Chicago. And this was with some of the former public housing sites that we touched. So there was the first project that I worked on was the former Harold Ickey site, which is in the South Loop of Chicago, former public housing towers that were, just outside of Chinatown and downtown near the McCormick Place. And then following that was Oakwood Shores, which is the former Ida B. Wells public housing site. And the next project that I'm working on is the next phase of Cabrini Green. And for those who know about Cabrini Green, that's probably one of the most notorious public housing projects, developments in the country. And so, but they do something interesting on those projects that I think works really, really well. And they have created working groups. And for every single project, every single development, there's a working group that is created. And this is a charge by the client, Chicago Housing Authority, who owns the land, and was worked in through the suggestion of different planners, activists, and the community residents, so they could be a part of the process and fully engaged. And so the working group is pretty much the project team, right? Like you would with your regular project teams, where you have your different consultants. And so in this case, we have, you know, of course, you have the developer. There's different architects that are part of the team. If there's different typologies that are part of the project, and folks are owning different parts of the master plan, so you'll have multiple architecture firms that are there. You also have the local aldermen, whatever neighborhood that the project falls under. You have CHA. You have us, Gensler, as the master planners, and then you have the community residents. There's a representative for the community residents that is there, and they also have legal representation, because there's a lot of agreements and deeds that were put in place with how these former public housing sites are supposed to be developed. And so what's interesting about that process with the community residents that serve on the working group is they are paid consultants. They're not doing this on their own time, so their time is valued. Their opinion is valued. They have equal sway and weight as the rest of the team members, and they're fully part of the process, and they're there at every part of the meeting. So it goes beyond just your checklist. Let's do our 2 or 3 community engagement meetings and call it a day. This is much more deeper than that. And what I love about it is we're able to get really firsthand information from the final end users, the stakeholders, and the community residents about where they would like to see the project and development go. So that's been one of the more successful models that I've seen and have participated in here in Chicago, but I'm sure there are many more. Those are the first ones that come to mind, though.
Great. So I mean, just one last question I was going to ask. You talked about some of the great changes that are happening and things that are helping make things more equitable. Apart from like housing, transportation, are there any other priorities you think that need to be focused on in terms of infrastructure to really make more equitable cities?
Yeah, well, when we talk about infrastructure is huge, right? You know, when you talk about transportation, that's a huge one for us here in Chicago. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to look at the CTA map, which is our subway system in Chicago, and you just look at the number of stops on the north and northwest side versus the south and west side between the different lines that run. I mean, in some cases, you'll go 3 or 4 blocks and there's a train station along each line on the north side, which is predominantly white, right? And then on the south and west side, which is predominantly Black and Latino, I mean, you'll go well over a mile and a half, in some cases 2 miles, before you'll even see a CTA stop. And so they're literally gaps. And and at first glance, you know, okay, we need more train stations, but it's more than that, because what happens is you have residents that are in these neighborhoods, right, who work in different parts of the city. They have to get around, but even their schedules, their life is impacted. If they're working after hours or off hours, right, they have to catch a bus to the train station. In a lot of cases, those buses do not run on a regular schedule. Or on the weekend, in some cases, those bus lines are even limited, and they have to find their own transportation to get to the train lines. So, I mean, I think transportation infrastructure is a huge one. Of course, there's a lot of conversation around just food deserts, but then also now, you know, especially with the global pandemic, we're talking about just accessible access and means to healthcare, right? And there's just huge disparities in Black and Brown communities when it comes to just general access to healthcare. And so, in fact, one of the largest hospitals that we have here in Chicago, Mercy Hospital, is actually about to close. And we do not know, you know, what is going to fill in its place, and how the residents in Bronzeville and Kenwood area, which is just south of downtown, where they are going to go and how they're going to be served and supported. So, and there's no backlash. There's no one really pushing back or really questioning, what the city has planned to move this forward, and how they plan to solve this inherent gap that's going to be created. So, those are the ones that immediately come to mind that I think have the most bearing and impact on some of the inequities that we see in marginalized communities.
Yeah, that's sad, and you definitely see some parallels in other cities as well. I mean, even here in DC, we've had similar issues. So I think we could start taking some questions from some of our fellow staff members here in the audience. I think first question is from Paola. She said, as you mentioned, diversity, inclusion, and equity is in fashion these days. Do you think it will continue to be implemented, or will this just be a phase?
I pray and hope that it is honestly this watershed moment that has a truly lasting impact on the industry. Much in the same way as I talked about sustainability, we don't go in and promote those stats anymore. We don't sell the client. Sustainability is just ingrained in our process now, right? It's just part of every project. I mean, at bare minimum, you're doing a LEED certified project, right? And those are just incorporated. The client gets it, we get it, and it's just ingrained. It's interwoven in the fabric of our everyday scope and services, right? My hope is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, these initiatives, which, let's be honest, have become industry buzzwords that are in some cases losing their meaning. Everyone is conflating the terminology and the use, and you see them thrown around on marketing brochures fairly loosely. And you even hear people talk about them, and they don't even understand the difference between the three, which is discouraging. But either way, my hope is that overall, this also becomes ingrained and just becomes a part of our industry, the way we do business, the way we engage with our clients, the way we engage with communities, the way we establish our project teams, and more importantly, it's a reflection of our leadership, whether it's at a project level, a studio level, an office level, firm level. We need to make sure that there's diversity across our ranks and that we reflect the communities to which we serve. So I'm hopeful. I'm praying that this has a true lasting impact.
I hope so too. We have another question from Jessica. What are the challenges, if any, with implementation of participatory design?
I think, there's offhand, I would say first there's an education piece that's tied to it, right? In some cases, you have to educate the client, and and the importance of the community engagement process, and making sure that that voice, the spirit of that community, is recognized and heard. And sometimes that can be a difficult conversation with the client, especially if they are on a rush schedule, on a budget, and they're trying to really fast track a project, and they may be doing it to check a box, but you're really trying to be intentful with the purpose and the process, and really infuse that into the actual final design, right? So sometimes it can be a little pushback with the client, but then also sometimes there can be pushback with the community residents, right? Let's be honest, they haven't always been treated fairly. They haven't always been, we as in, the industry and developers and, coming into these communities, we haven't always been transparent as well. And so their guard is up, and you have to work with them to build trust. And that starts with honestly listening. You kind of go in, instead of going into that first community meeting and saying, this is where we're at in the process. And they're like, okay, you guys have clearly been chewing on this and working on this for the last 6 months, and now you're just sharing it with us. So that's, mistake number one. So they're already going to be even more apprehensive and reluctant to participate in the process. So it's finding a way to engage the community early, or as early as possible in the process, going in without any preconceived notions or ideas on how you're going to implement the design, listening first and being open to suggestions, and being open to learning, because these are the people who know their community better than you, right? I mean, they know what the issues are, they know what they would like to see, and they know what is going to be needed to see that community and neighborhood be successful. And so So those are the critical pieces. And then as you're listening and you're starting to piece together, I think everything, it's really finding a way to kind of thread those different voices and concerns and really make sure that they're all valued at the same level, and they're all incorporated in some way, shape, and form of the design. And so the community residents can then actually point to something that they own, what they have their fingerprint on it, right? Like there's some sense of ownership. And when you have that, I'm a firm believer that that really tremendously exponentially adds to the value and success of any project when there's true ownership by the local residents.
Thank you. Next question is from Dennis. He's asking, I have read in many instances the past decade or so that only 3% of nationally registered architects are African American. Is this true? And if so, are minorities not being encouraged enough during college to follow up with registration? What can we do as registered architects to help?
So absolutely. So Dennis, that stat is actually wrong. It's less than 3%. We have been hovering just above 2%, unfortunately. And what's even more discouraging about that is those numbers have pretty much flatlined over the last 3 or 4 decades. I mean, you know, NOMA was founded 50 years ago, 1971. And since that time, we have roughly stayed about the same in terms of representation and license Black architects in particular in the industry. When it comes to Black female architects, we are less than even 1%. It's 0.02%. Maybe it's 0.03. We're inching our way up, but it's, I mean, the numbers are really, really shocking. So but what we are seeing is there are a lot of minorities that are entering the profession. There are a lot of minorities that are entering schools of architecture and graduating, but for whatever reason, we lose them at some point in the pipeline. We lose them between graduation and licensure. And there's a lot of different reasons for this, right? Some of it is industry focus. I mean, you know, you think about some professionals who are coming out of college, Blacks and Latinos, in some cases being the first to graduate from a 4-year institution, right? And there's a lot of pressure to succeed. There's a lot of pressure to support and help your family, right? And so architecture isn't that high paying job. You know, when you talk about, especially if you have to okay, I can just, you know, I've worked with students, you know, mentoring, especially like through the ACE mentor program. And, you know, you're sitting there, you're talking with them and they're doing the math and these kids are sharp and they're like, okay, so I got to go to either a 5-year school or a 4 and 2. Okay, that's already more than most people have to do. And so that's more student debt. Okay, and then I have to earn what's IDP and how many hours? And then wait, okay, how many exams I got to take to get, okay, how much do I make? I don't know about that. That doesn't necessarily add up, right? And so you see a lot of students, or a lot of even my classmates from Howard, right? We had a graduating class of about 30. I think only 5 of us actually got licensed from that, out of my class from Howard. And we were, I mean, it was drilled into us the importance of getting licensed, you know, throughout the whole time we were there. But a lot of folks ended up leaving architecture and maybe went on the construction side or the owner and client management side, or, you know, consulting side, and really found a different way where they could be successful and earn more money. So that's an industry problem in and of itself, where that automatically, just the pay structure, right? And then the fact that architects have not done a good job at really, I think, enforcing the value of our services, of our professional design services or the industry. You know, it has greatly impacted, I think, minority communities and discouraged a lot of folks from pursuing licensure in architecture. The other piece is, you know, just kind of finding ways to really build that pipeline, that pipeline of talent, of diverse talent, and finding a way to nurture them and support them throughout the whole entire process. Everyone does a really, really good job. And when I say everyone, I'm including AIA, NOMA, ACE. You know, there's 1,000,001 K through 12 programs that are out there. And we all do a really good job of tracking the number of students that come through our programs. But we have no idea what the stats are in terms of retention. How many of those students that go through Project Pipeline or participate in ACE or do one of AIA's K through 12 program summer initiatives, right? how many actually go on to a school in architecture, how many go on to graduate, and then how many become licensed. We need to collectively do a better job of sharing some of that information, some of that data across these different organizations, across these different programs, and collectively do a better job to understand, if what we're doing is working. You can't manage what you can't measure. And if we're not measuring, the success of these programs all the way through to licensure, right, which is the ultimate goal, that's the purpose of these programs. If we're not measuring that, then it's really hard to be able to course correct or decide or figure out what we need to tweak and change and dial in or dial up in order to make these more impactful and more effective. So that's going to take larger conversations with other collateral organizations. NOMA is now getting pulled into the loop with larger conversations with NCARB, with NAB, with ACSA, AIA, and AIAS. And so we're hoping that through these conversations, we'll be able to really find a way to just start to share information, share data, and start to track our progress across all these initiatives.
Well, Jason, we're at time, but I definitely want to thank you for joining us. I definitely want to personally thank you for all the work you're doing and all the work that NOMA is doing on behalf of minority architects. And it's great chatting with you, and thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.